What's up, YouTube? So this video is going to go into a little more detail and explanation in regards to my modern mid-range junk good stuff deck. Hopefully you guys already watched the deck tech, you guys should already know what's all in the deck of mine currently, and I want to go over some of the cards that were in my sideboard or were in my deck, and where they ended up, what cards replaced them, and then I also want to explain the evolution process from my playtime, what decks I beat, what decks I lost to, where the cards kind of influenced their spots in my deck. Just an overall understanding of what this deck does. It's essentially set up to be a pretty decent matchup against any deck game one. It doesn't have really any type of advantage, but it's just, it's just got a lot of good cards, and gives you a very even to slight advantage in game one. And where it really shines is in your sideboard. Once you know what deck you're playing against, then you can really sideboard a lot of cards to make your deck extremely advantageous. This is mainly for my meta at my store. And I'm not saying that this is perfect at all, but with my meta, there are a lot of affinity style decks. There are a lot of blue, white, red control decks. These seem to be really popular, so that's why my sideboard has a lot of those cards to combat those popular decks. Alright, so now that you got the understanding, I'm going to kind of go over how my matchups have been. The first modern tournament that I played in, my first match, I won 2-0. This was against a weaker Auras deck. It was lacking some of the hexproof creatures that you see commonly, like the Slippery Boggle and some of the other really effective cards. And because of that, the deck was just much weaker than where it should be. So I 2-0'd him, and then I went on to play a very, very aggressive Affinity Robots deck with Cranial Plating. I got completely stomped by this. This is where my first introduction to the Affinity matchup. At this tournament, there was 12 people, and 3 people, which is 25%, of the field was playing an Affinity Robots deck. So that's where my sideboard began to grow in artifact hate after this tournament. My next matchup that day was against a blue, white, red control deck. This deck was primarily heavy with like Planeswalkers and just a lot of the control-ish type spells, and its win con also was the Celestial Colonnade. It did not run any type of Resto Angels or Geist of St. Traphs, which I'll mention later on. I 2-0'd that guy. And then I went on to play a Living End deck. I was still pretty new to the modern format. I was not very familiar at all with Living End. At game one, I still didn't know what his deck did when I first thought seized him, and then after he comboed out, then I was like, oh, okay. So I altered my deck a little bit there. I lost game one, and in game two, I was able to keep my Deathrite Shamans up and running, completely shut down his graveyard, and I won game two. We went on to game three with no time left in the round, and our overall record, mine was 2-1, and his was 2-0-1. So regardless of the outcome, he was going to end up winning because we didn't have enough time to actually play the third game. So I went ahead and conceded to him, and so that's how day one went. Technically, I finished 2-2, but you could easily say we would have just drew, and I would have been 2-1-1. So the next tournament that I played in was, very distressful. Wait, distressful? Is that a word? Distraughting? I don't know. It was painful. We'll use that word. The game one, I played against a standard deck. And let's just say standard decks really aren't that effective with modern legal cards. This guy was playing a Rakdos deck that had Rakdos Return, so he had a lot of discard spells. He had a lot of hasty creatures. but it still wasn't enough to match up to my Modern deck. I 2-0'd him, and this is where it got painful. Game 2, or I should say match 2, was against this kind of interesting combination of Gifts Ungiven with Vengevine, and he, I didn't have the greatest of hands, which happens in Magic, but he ran rampant over me, and 2-0'd me. And then I went on to play another blue-white-red control deck for match 3. This one featured Geist of St. Traft, which proved to be extremely difficult for my deck to deal with. Really, the only card I have is Liliana of the Veil. And he was able to constantly protect it by flashing in Snapcaster when I would try to use Lily's ability. He had Resto Angels to get more, card advantage through his Snapcasters and his graveyard. So after that deck, that's when I'll explain a little more as far as the sideboard process, but that's when I boarded in my Scavenging Oozes. I realized that I was costing myself too much life. I needed to come up with some creatures in my main deck that would help regain that life to really keep my board state stabilized against those control-ish decks and stuff. Most recently, I played in another Modern tournament at my store. First game was, and this is after I made all my changes to the current deck list you see now. I played first match was a Blister Coil Weird with Paradise Mantle Storm deck. Game 1, I had no idea what this deck was. I'd never even seen it, and I was able to make very wise decisions with my removal spells and what cards to get rid of from his hand with Thoughtseize, and I was able to take down Game 1. Then we moved on to Game 2, and again, it was after I kind of realized what his deck was sort of going for. Again, I boarded in like my Surgical Extractions, and I Abrupt Decayed his Blister Coil Weird, and then I Surgical Extraction his Blister Coil Weird from the graveyard, and that basically shut down his whole combo, and he conceded, so I 2-0'd him there. Game 2 was against a Megatron deck, and I kept a very questionable hand, and it just didn't work out. He was able to, with that one card that basically you control target player's turn, that artifact card, it's escaping my mind right now, but Mindslaver, I think that's it. Anyways, he got his 3 Urza's lands out and up and running and went to town. But then I moved to my sideboard and boarded in 9 cards. The Stony Silences, the Surgical Extractions, everything that would really affect his board state. It was fantastic. 9 sideboard cards, and it was pretty easy wins from there on out for me, and I went ahead and won the next 2 games to take the match down. What else can I talk about that deck? He played some Pithy Needles and stuff to shut down my Ghost Quarter from slowing him down with his Urza's, because Game 2 I used Ghost Quarter and blew up his Urza's power plant and really set him back. So Game 3 used Pithy Needle against it, but it didn't help because I did something where whatever the case was, his land ended up in his graveyard still, and I went ahead and I Surgical Extractioned and took the land card because it's any card in the graveyard. So he lost like all his Urza's power plants from his deck, and I just really slowed him down and beat him that way. Moving on, Game 3. I'm going to go ahead and pause this video real fast. Alright, I'm back. Sorry, this video is going to end up kind of going a little long. Match 3, we're moving on to Match 3, was actually the same guy that I played in my first tournament with his Affinity Robots deck. And the first game is the tough one against that deck because he's going to explode. And he kept a questionable hand, where he he kept a questionable hand that only had one artifact play on turn 1, and then he was going to try to go off on turn 2 and drop his Mox Opal then. But he forgot that I played Thoughtseize, so on my turn I Thoughtseized and took his Mox Opal because I noticed that he didn't have any other land cards in his deck, so he was going to be short on mana and hard to kind of recover from that. Because of that, I went on to pretty much decisively take that game. Then the sideboard came in, and this is where it's fantastic because Fracturing Gust against robots is amazing. So I have the 2 copies of Fracturing Gust in my sideboard. I went ahead and, boarded in, I think, 8 cards for this matchup. And my opening hand, which was probably the best one that I could really ask for, was it was 4 lands with a Fracturing Gust. And then I had some removal in Abrupt Decay, and I believe I had Thoughtseize, or else it was some kind of creature. And then I ended up drawing, like on turn 2, I drew a Maelstrom Pulse. So I was able to blow up his Cranial Plating on turn 2 or 3, slow him down. I was just taking, a couple damage each turn, 2 to 4 damage each turn. He played one of those Steel Overseers. I blew it up with the Maelstrom Pulse, just again buying me time to get to my 5 lands. Turn 4, I had 4 lands in play. 1 was a basic forest, the rest were non-basics. I had 1 Noble Hierarch in play and a Dark Confidant. I passed the turn, and he went ahead and he dropped Blood Moon, turning all my non-basics into mountains, and Fracturing Gust costs a combination of 3 green or white with 2 colorless. So I was going to be pretty screwed. In response to him playing Blood Moon, I decided to Path to Exile my Dark Confidant and search out for a basic plains. That way I could use the basic forest, basic plains, and the mana from the Noble Hierarch to cast my Fracturing Gust on turn 5 and completely wipe his board. I went from having 8 life up to 18 life and stabilized, and just decisively won from there. It was a really awesome play and match there. So I actually got first place in that tournament. And today's Friday, recording this. I'm actually getting ready to, well, later on, because it's the morning still, but I'm going to be playing in another Modern tournament tonight with the same deck list that you see here. And, I'll hopefully give you guys an update to see how it goes from there. Here are some of the cards I'm going to go over that were in my deck at one point. I ran a Duress, just more hand disruption, which is really good, and I actually had some Inquisition of Kozilek. I think I had 2 copies, and then I went down to 1 copy, and now I'm down to no copies in the sideboard. I just feel like it doesn't do enough. I think Thoughtseize is sufficient, and I like how my sideboard is currently set up. Here I had Loxodon Smiter. I think I had 2 copies main deck, along with 2 copies of Voice of Resurgence main deck, with 3 Knight of the Reliquary, and I had no Kitchen Finks main deck. They were my sideboard cards. Loxodon Smiter I was really high on, and he just kept getting worse and worse. He wasn't doing enough in play. His the second ability here, like, if he's discarded, you get to put him in play, was not used like in any matchups. The only time I actually got to put him out in play was against that standard deck that had Rakdos' Return, and so I got to put him out for free. Other than that, he was just a 4/4 for 3, which was nice and can't be countered, but it was not good enough, so I cut him completely. I have a second Horizon Canopy. I had this in main deck at one point, but it wasn't great. Like, it's a great card, don't get me wrong, but I really like how my mana base is set up now, and I just don't have a spot for a 23rd land. I like 22 lands with having, up here you can see I've got 7 accelerators in the 1-drop spot. I ran a second Linvala, but I cut her. Like I said, I didn't have enough. There's no games with Splinter Twin or Kiki Jiki, so I cut her, added in Thrun the Last Troll. I'm going to see how he does against that control matchup. I had Baneslayer Angel. I was kind of mixed about making this more of an aggressive deck. Baneslayer is a great card, But, you know, trying to get to 5 mana, and then especially with Dark Confidant, you know, you flip her over and you're going to take 5. It's not the greatest. Aethersworn Canonist is a good sideboard card, but it only affects, you know, like the Storm decks and stuff primarily. Didn't really do enough, so I cut her. I had a 4th Noble Hierarch, and, you know, I just didn't really think that I needed 8 1-drop accelerators. Then I had a couple Dismembers in the sideboard. This is a fantastic card, but I feel like I have enough removal with Liliana, Abrupt Decay, and Maelstrom Pulse, along with my my Hand Disruption, that I just don't need this one. And I had a 3rd copy of Lingering Souls, which was great, but you know, I just don't feel like I need more creature tokens. I've got enough creatures, enough tokens, that I feel like my deck's pretty good. So hopefully this gives you guys a little insight to my deck and kind of where it went. And like I said, the life gain was really important. I did not have the 2 Scavenging Ooze. I did not have the 3 Kitchen Finks. Now that I boarded them in, I can afford a turn 1 fetch land into Shockland untap into Thoughtseize and lose 5 life, but by turn 3 I will start gaining that back through Scavenging Ooze, Deathrite Shaman, Kitchen Finks, and that 5 life turn 1 is not going to affect me as much. So I hope you guys enjoy the deck. It's a lot of fun to play. If you guys have any suggestions, feel free to comment and let me know what you guys think. And I'll let you guys know how I do tonight. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.